He called it undrivable. Ferrari just tore down Hamilton's SF25 48 hours before the final race. No new parts, no upgrades, just panic, pressure, and one last shot at redemption. Subscribe now, because what happens in Abu Dhabi could decide Hamilton's entire future with Ferrari. The Grand Prix of Qatar wasn't just a poor result for Lewis Hamilton, it was the weekend that shattered the fragile bond he had started to build with Ferrari. From the very first lap of practice, Hamilton struggled to keep the SF25 planted in the corners. The car snapped on entry, lost traction mid-corner, and punished any attempt to push. And when he crossed the line in Q1, only to hear over the radio that he was out, the silence that followed told the whole story. Internally, Ferrari engineers were stunned by how little correlation there was between their simulations and reality. On paper, the upgraded rear wing and suspension settings should have delivered more grip in the high-speed sections of Losail. But instead, the car became almost impossible to handle in dirty air. The wind sensitivity was off the charts, and Hamilton was the one who paid the price. In post-session debriefs, his comments were clinical but emotionally detached. What broke the trust wasn't just the bad performance. It was the feeling that Ferrari had stopped listening. Hamilton had warned for weeks that the rear stability was deteriorating, especially under race fuel loads. But the team continued to pursue downforce in the front end, ignoring how fragile the rear became when the track temperatures spiked. In Qatar, that disconnect was exposed brutally, and Hamilton felt betrayed. Charles Leclerc, who fared only slightly better in Qatar, confirmed many of the same issues: lack of balance, no confidence under braking, and unpredictable snap oversteer. But it was Hamilton who made the message public. In a now viral post-race interview, he said, "We can't win if we can't even finish. Right now, we're not even close to competing." It wasn't an attack. It was a warning. Inside the garage, morale dropped fast. The engineering team was split. Some believe Hamilton's feedback was exaggerated, a driver frustrated by his own performance. Others believe Ferrari had pushed development too far in one direction and had stopped trusting the instincts of its most experienced driver. That internal fracture turned what could have been a technical challenge into a political one. Fred Vasseur was forced to act. In a closed-door meeting the Monday after Qatar, he reviewed telemetry, simulator results, and tire wear reports. What emerged was a damning conclusion. The SF25 was fundamentally unpredictable. Its performance window was too narrow. And in hot, high-speed circuits like Losail, it became borderline dangerous to drive. Hamilton's complaints weren't emotional, they were backed by data. That's why Abu Dhabi matters. It's not just the final race of the season. It's a test of whether Ferrari can respond to a crisis by listening instead of defending. For Hamilton, it's a chance to end a brutal debut year on a note of progress. For Ferrari, it's a chance to prove they can adapt before 2026 resets the game. And for fans, it's a final reminder of what happens when trust between team and driver begins to unravel. Ferrari knew they couldn't redesign the SF25 in 5 days, but they also knew doing nothing was no longer an option. The solution wasn't revolutionary, it was mechanical. The team ditched the Qatar setup entirely, reverting to a baseline configuration they had parked after the Spanish Grand Prix. That version of the car featured a more compliant rear suspension and a milder front-end aero load. It lacked peak downforce, but offered one thing Hamilton had been screaming for: predictability. The suspension stiffness was dialed back significantly, especially at the rear. That change came straight from Hamilton's feedback. In Qatar, the car's rear end was bouncing unpredictably during braking, especially through fast directional changes. By softening the suspension, Ferrari gave the car more compliance over curbs and bumps a critical advantage in Abu Dhabi's second sector, where curb riding is essential. The trade-off: less precision under load. But for Hamilton, control now matters more than sharpness. Another change was the rake. Ferrari has typically run a flatter car than Red Bull, but for Abu Dhabi, they raised the rear ride height slightly to shift more aerodynamic load to the rear axle. This decision was data-driven. Hamilton's telemetry in Qatar showed massive instability under high-speed yaw. By increasing rake, the car now produces more rear-end downforce at speed, helping to stabilize the chassis when the car rotates aggressively through corners like turns 11 and 14. Then came a more subtle fix: engine mapping. In Qatar, power delivery was too aggressive, especially in lower gears. That made rear traction worse and amplified Hamilton's struggles exiting slower corners. For Abu Dhabi, Ferrari rewrote the torque maps to deliver power more progressively, giving Hamilton more throttle control through low-speed sections like the hotel complex. It's not just about horsepower anymore, it's about how and when that power hits the rear tires. Aerodynamically, Ferrari took a step back in time. They reinstalled the older front wing spec, one that produced less peak front downforce but balanced better with the softer rear. The team admitted this choice would cost lap time in qualifying, but believed it would stabilize race performance. Hamilton signed off on the change personally. After months of struggling with sharp front rotation and a loose rear, he was willing to sacrifice single-lap speed for race consistency. The team also adjusted brake migration, settings the balance between front and rear braking force throughout deceleration. In Qatar, Hamilton was forced to manually adjust this setting every lap to compensate for instability. For Abu Dhabi, engineers built a new map based on his telemetry to automate that shift more precisely. This change, though small, allows Hamilton to focus more on positioning and less on wrestling the tools mid-corner. Finally, Ferrari gave Hamilton more freedom with setup overrides. He can now run higher traction control thresholds and shift brake bias manually with more range. These tools allow him to customize the car lap by lap based on how the tires behave. For a driver who values control and nuance, these changes are huge. It won't transform the SF25 into a winning machine, but it might transform it into something Hamilton can finally fight with. When Lewis Hamilton straps into the SF25 for the final time in Abu Dhabi, he'll be doing more than racing, he'll be reprogramming his mindset. After 25 races of frustration, false starts, and radio messages filled with tension, Hamilton has reached a mental crossroads. The Ferrari chapter hasn't started as a fairy tale, but the 7-time world champion isn't wired to give up. Behind the scenes, his approach has shifted from expectation to execution. He stopped asking the car to be perfect. Now, he simply wants to extract the maximum from whatever he's given. Hamilton's mental preparation for Abu Dhabi began the moment he stepped out of the car in Qatar. Instead of debriefing emotionally, he flew directly to Maranello for 2 days of simulator work, not to improve the car, but to realign himself with it. He knows the SF25 won't be ideal, but what he can control is how he drives it. In simulator sessions, he focused on tire phase sensitivity, rear-end balance feel, and throttle modulation through long radius corners. The goal was simple: adapt even if it hurts. This new mindset echoes his early McLaren years when the car wasn't always title-worthy, but Hamilton could still outperform it. At 39, he's returned to that mentality. Instead of aiming to win, he's aiming to surprise. He's set personal targets: out-qualify Leclerc, finish ahead of one Red Bull or McLaren, and avoid any tire degradation spikes after lap 20. These aren't championship goals, they're internal benchmarks. And for a driver like Hamilton, those internal races often matter just as much. His inner circle has also played a key role. Angela Cullen may no longer be in the paddock, but Hamilton's mental coaching team has doubled down in recent weeks. Their sessions in Abu Dhabi have focused on one principle: detachment. Let go of the politics. Let go of the pressure. Focus on the lap in front of you. It's a concept rooted in performance psychology, and it's something Hamilton has used successfully in the past after tough stretches, like the 2011 slump or the 2016 Nico rivalry. There's also the question of legacy. Hamilton is acutely aware that every race at Ferrari is judged not just by fans, but by history. The greats Schumacher, Lauda, Prost all left a mark with the Scuderia. So far, Lewis hasn't. Abu Dhabi offers a final chance to close the year with statement, however small. Even a gritty, calculated P5 could shift the narrative heading into 2026. That matters, because Hamilton didn't come to Ferrari to fade quietly. He came to rewrite the final act of his story. And then there's the garage, the faces around him. Mechanics, engineers, strategists, they've seen his frustration. Now they're seeing something else, a version of Hamilton that still believes. His presence in team briefings has intensified. He's even taken time to speak to junior engineers, directly asking for opinions, listening to their insights. That humility has earned respect. Even if the results aren't there, the leadership is. And that alone has started to rebuild trust from the ground up. Heading into Sunday, Hamilton is not chasing a podium. He's chasing clarity. He wants to understand the limits of his car one last time without anger, without distraction. Because once the flag falls in Abu Dhabi, everything resets. A new car, a new philosophy, a second year to get it right. But that journey begins here with one clean, controlled, defiant drive to close the book on a year that tested him like no other. Ferrari knew the risks when they signed Hamilton. This wasn't a marketing move, it was a strategic bet. Bring in a 7-time world champion, inject experience into a team often accused of emotional decision-making, and lay the foundation for 2026. But as the final race of the season approaches, the results don't reflect the vision. 0 wins, only glimpses of pace, and a driver who has spent more time fighting the car than fighting rivals. Still, inside Ferrari, no one is panicking because 2025 was always a sacrifice year. What 2025 revealed was the depth of Ferrari's weaknesses and Hamilton's patience. They learned their simulation tools were overtuned, that their aerodynamic correlation was inconsistent, and that their upgrade pathway wasn't agile enough. But more importantly, they learned how vital driver feedback is when development stops. Hamilton flagged balance issues months ago. Those warnings, once dismissed, are now guiding how Ferrari approaches the 2026 car, a machine built entirely under the new regulations. For Hamilton, the mission is personal. He didn't leave Mercedes to coast into retirement. He came to Ferrari with unfinished business to prove he could win in red, like Schumacher before him. This first season has been humbling, but it has also sharpened his focus. He's learned what this team lacks, what it needs, and where he can truly make a difference not just behind the wheel, but in the simulator, in setup meetings, and in how the team handles adversity. 2026 is the real test. With brand new power unit regulations and aerodynamic rules designed to bring closer racing, every team will be starting from scratch. Ferrari believes this is their moment to reset the order. They've already assigned Hamilton to lead the direction of the 2026 car from seating position to torque delivery, brake-by-wire tuning, and chassis feedback loops. In short, they're building the next car around him. Abu Dhabi is the end of one chapter, but it's the blueprint for the next.